The Oryx quest started in Doha, Qatar over a month ago. 4 of the world's fastest sailing machines, 46 of the world's leading sailors. The battle? To race around the world from Qatar to Qatar, through the world's toughest oceans, in pursuit of $1 million US.
In 30 days, the leaders of the Oryx quest have sailed over 12,000 miles, halfway around the world. 4 of the biggest and fastest racing machines set off from the Middle East. Only 3 are still together and racing, and they're deep into the high latitudes of the Southern Ocean, sailing through the most remote wastelands on the planet, more than 2,000 miles from land, with only the threat of huge storms and icebergs for company. It's grey, it's cold, and it's lonely. But ahead lies the gateway to paradise. A left turn into warmer climates lies beyond the sailor's Everest, Cape Horn. And it's that dream of turning the corner into the South Atlantic that has motivated the Oryx quest sailors through the last miserable days. For the French aboard Geronimo, though, that moment will not be arriving on this race. Geronimo was forced into Western Australia with damage to the starboard beam. Olivier de Kersasson and his team rejoined the race 3,000 miles behind the leaders, determined to take the fight forward. But a few days later, Geronimo was heading for Australia again, this time to Sydney and out of the race. On March the 2nd, Geronimo's last stand finally ended. Sydney Harbour, most sailors' dream. But for the crew of Geronimo, it was the end of theirs. With signs of further structural damage appearing in another part of the boat, skipper Olivier de Kersasson deemed it would be too dangerous for the boat to continue. Their race was over. The blazing lights of the city took some adjusting to. This was a world away from the ocean they'd just left behind. Their mooring was in prime position, but it wasn't enough to lift the palatable disappointment.
It's better to take risk making innovation. I prefer to take risk being building the biggest trimaran that has ever been built than to make a copy of what all the others do. That's my opinion.
Geronimo was arguably the favourite to win the Oryx quest. For the first 3 weeks of the race, the French waged a compelling war against the Qatari Doha 2006, with each of them trading the lead. And it was poised to get even more interesting as they prepared to hit the Southern Ocean.
We were really looking forward to a trimaran versus a catamaran battle, and it does show very much for the other boats what a fine line it is between pushing the boat hard and getting good miles under their belt and pushing the boat a little bit too hard, and if you do and break anything, then it's the end of the road. You can't go around Cape Horn with a boat that's not 100%.
Back at the front and on day 24, Doha and Cheyenne were in the Southern Pacific, with Cape Horn the next milestone. Both boats dipped south, sailing closer to Antarctica and ice, but reducing the distance to Cape Horn. Doha led the Ice Watch, using a combination of data and onboard lookout.
We've seen satellite images of icebergs in certain areas that have been scanned. We gave Cheyenne and Daedalus all the information on the icebergs that we had. We thought it was only fair to let them know where they were. I hope that keeps them a bit safer.
In this part of the world, any information is patchy, and any warnings of ice are taken very seriously.
I think when Brian saw us make a dive south, he realized that he had some information on icebergs that were in a close proximity, which was very much appreciated.
As Cheyenne took evasive action, Doha trusted their ice data and headed deeper south.
When it's this cold, this wet, and this windy at sea, clothing becomes the most important thing in the world. So what does a sailor's kit bag contain?
We all know how a Formula One driver puts on his gear, his safety gear, and gets up to go racing. But have you ever wondered how a Formula One sailing star gets up ready for work?
We just got one set of foulies, one set of mid layers and 3 sets of base layers.
I go for 2 base layers and also a Polartec mid layer.
Got a couple of pairs of Gore-Tex socks, 1 pair of boots, a pair of deck shoes.
A windstopper balaclava and also a Gore-Tex balaclava on the outside of that.
A couple of pairs of gloves, a couple of hats.
You have a Polartec and then a windstopper mid layer on top of that. And then you have your HPX Gore-Tex outer shell.
We persuaded round-the-world sailor Nick Maloney to be our test dummy for the day. And in true test dummy style, we put him through his paces. And then, to top it off, we put him in a giant fridge.
They've got me in a fridge now, -5 degrees Celsius, and they're going to fire up these fans and create a bit of wind chill factor. I'm hoping I don't end up like this bloke.
The idea was to simulate the Southern Ocean and see just how warm Maloney's clothes kept him. The verdict?
I could have stayed in there for ages. I actually was in there thinking this isn't like sailing. It doesn't get cold.
So that wasn't cold. Try this. A dunk in a freezing plunge pool. That's the theory, but what about the reality? When you're surrounded 24/7 by water, it will eventually find some small crevice to creep into. And when it does, it's not pleasant. The result? Salt sores. As Daedalus's James Dunning discovered.
My entire body is covered in these.
And that means everywhere.
You definitely get spotty bottom because we're limited to the amount of clothing that we can take. For instance, 2 or 3 pairs of pants.
I have a lot of baby wipes on board. That's kind of what I usually use in this situation.
And so, although you do have an opportunity to wash things, on this boat you could wash something and then you can't really hang it out to dry because it's just like hanging it in a hose pipe.
I think just keeping on the healthy side of being dirty will be obviously something to be aware of, but I don't think the smells and things are going to bother any of us after a few days.
As the fleet charged away from New Zealand, once again Daedalus sailed themselves to within 150 miles of Cheyenne. For the smallest boat in the fleet, it was a remarkable achievement, but one that was short-lived. A low pressure built directly over them. Wind instantly dropped as they found themselves in the eye of a storm.
As we were in the eye of the storm, we've got 360-degree peripheral vision around us. You can see all the fronts, the clouds and the weather patterns around us, but being right at the centre of the eye of the storm, you've got absolutely no wind whatsoever. 3 days ago we were in the big rolling seas with the sou'westerly, and then 3 days later you're absolutely becalmed in the middle of the Southern Ocean. One of the few places you expect to be like that.
Iceberg? Where? Iceberg?
There was very little the Daedalus crew could do other than to wait for the system to move on and the wind to build again. It was frustrating, and not what the Southern Ocean usually has on offer.
In front, Cheyenne was able to ride the winds of the low pressure, and instead of being hampered, able to carry the system east. Over 1,000 miles ahead, Doha was approaching Cape Horn. The Oryx quest was nearing sailing's greatest landmark, and an end to the freezing Southern Ocean, for the time being at least. Three of the largest and fastest sailing boats in the world are deep in the Southern Ocean, racing in the Oryx quest. 34 sailors are cold, wet, tired and hungry, but they're racing for $1 million. After 3 days of extreme light winds, Daedalus finally broke out of the centre of the low pressure, but they've paid a heavy penalty and are now 600 miles behind Cheyenne.
The drama wasn't over for Daedalus. In front of them, a large storm loomed threateningly, something that was feared by all sailors.
I guess if you continue to keep going out into the ocean, and particularly in the deep south, it's going to happen one day. So I experienced the mother of all storms. In my whole career, I'd never thought that I'd reach the point where I totally lost control of the situation. Huge buildings of whitewater just smashing all around the boat and missing me by just metres, and I knew that one of them had my name on it, and I didn't know where to run, and I really didn't have any way to hide, and I tried sailing faster, I tried sailing slower, but it was all a matter of being in the wrong place at the wrong time. I lost the plot completely, and I didn't know what to do other than to get on the blower and inform my family that I think this one's it for me. And never in my wildest dreams did I ever think that I have to make that call, and it was probably one of the toughest things I've ever done in my whole life.
On board Daedalus, Tony Bullimore recognised the storm in his track as something not just with his name on it, but something very serious. Bullimore made the call to turn and flee.
About 3 or 4 days ago, we were doing okay. Then our weather router, along with the navigator on board, said that there was a big depression coming down from the North Pacific, which was Hurricane Percy. The direction that we were going in north we would have collided with this very major Hurricane Percy, which was changing shape and getting bigger and becoming more powerful. So we had to basically hove to and let the depression pass us. You've got to have a bit of respect for what's going on around you to protect the boat and obviously look after the crew and everything else.
Daedalus were in an unfortunate position in that there was a tropical cyclone, or hurricane as we call them in the Northern Hemisphere, joined with an ordinary depression going around the Southern Ocean. These two made a monster low. The satellite pictures and also the weather models showed really strong winds within the low. It could have done an awful lot of damage, and who knows, if they'd carried on they might have escaped it, but they didn't. But we do know now they've got a boat that's not damaged and a crew that's not injured. Did Tony Bullimore make the right decision? I think the answer has to be yes.
As Daedalus was running from Hurricane Percy, Doha was approaching Cape Horn.
Of all the sailing landmarks, Cape Horn is the most revered by the world's mariners. It marks the gateway into and out of the Southern Ocean. It's a dramatic and evocative place that stays in the hearts of all who pass it.
We went around on Cheyenne. We were really, really lucky, and it was a beautiful day. You could see the Andes Mountains, but other times there was actually, I think Guillermo Altadil's been around 5 times and he's never seen it. It's either been dark or foggy, or he's been too far away and never saw it. So it was nice on my first time around Cape Horn to actually see it the next time, even if though it might be a little blip on the radar or a mark on the GPS. I'll still remember what it looked like.
And the last time I went round, we had some mist, big mist. And of the 10 people on board, there was, I think, only about 3 had actually been round the Cape before. If you go round in the daytime, it's a clear day. You can get emotional over it, especially if you're going around the world. At night, it's quite different. If it's a dark, overcast night, you can't see anything, and you're just navigating off your instruments. And before you say Jack Robinson, you're round the corner and you're gone,
The only reason why you would take a bottle of champagne or a bottle of wine is for Cape Horn. Last time we took a couple of Heinekens of all things, and we all drank them, and then we used the camp mattresses that we sleep on for standby, and wrote Cape Horn all over those, and got the photographs of going around with a couple of bottles of beer.
But there's another side to the Horn, its dangerous side.
Cape Horn is every sailor's dream or nightmare. As the low pressure gets barreled around the Southern Ocean, it has a very narrow gap to go through. It's got the high Andes to the north and the Antarctic Peninsula to the south. Not only does the weather get funneled through there, but also the water. You get a strong current that forces the waves up and makes them steeper and shorter. And near Cape Horn, the water shallows to 100 metres or so. So big currents, big winds, biggest waves anywhere on the planet. I think that Cape Horn really does deserve its reputation.
Doha met with Cape Horn on a bad day. The Horn was rough and unpleasant and made the transition into the South Atlantic hard.
Just got around Cape Horn, we had a brief glimpse of it. That was spectacular. It's been very difficult conditions to get around because as we approached it, the normal westerly winds dropped away, and we ended up beating in easterly winds that kicked up quite a big sea.
Despite the big seas, they were safely through. The Southern Ocean leg was over. Warmer climes awaited the Qatari boat. 14,000 miles behind in Qatar, the support for the Oryx quest has extended into the local schools, and the Oryx quest creator, Tracy Edwards, is helping to explain the educational benefits offered by her sport.
An education programme, if it's done properly for a round-the-world sailing event, can be an amazing way of teaching children. It's fun, and you can learn geography, history, science, about cultures of other peoples, the nationalities on the boats, engineering, navigation. It's endless, really. 10,000 school children in Qatar signed up to the programme, and it's the first time I've really sort of come across some of the youngsters that have been taking part. It was so amazing. See all the posters up and the way they've been plotting the courses of the boats, and of course understanding what they've learnt out of these boats racing around the world. It really showed me the depth of their understanding, so I really enjoyed it.
Tracy Edwards is a pioneer in the world of sailing. She skippered the first all-female crew in the Whitbread Round the World race, and then led an all-female team on a Jules Verne attempt aboard Royal and Sun Alliance, a previous incarnation of Daedalus. Her days of pioneering have opened the door to a new wave of women sailors, the latest to step through being Ellen MacArthur. On the 5th of February 2005, Ellen became the fastest person to circumnavigate the globe single-handed, proving what Edwards established, that gender is irrelevant.
Sailing is a sport where men can go and compete against women, and there's no reason that women and men can't race on the same playing field. There's no difference between the guys and the girls, and anyone can go out there and do that.
In reality, it's different. Only 3 of the 46 sailors that started the Oryx quest were women.
I had to limit sort of the weaker people to one person. I couldn't afford more than one woman. It was going to reduce my wattage total to a point that was unacceptable.
In general, you would think that physiologically the women might fare a little bit better, actually.
Talented female sailors still have to battle before getting anywhere near a boat. But as Ellen MacArthur and Tracy Edwards have proven, women can reach the very top of the sport.
Women tend to have a little higher percentage of body fat, so in terms of sort of physical output, they might be starting a little bit higher than the men, which really in this sort of case means that they have a little bit more energy stores. They may actually preserve their muscle mass a little bit better.
Even though the boys are big and strong, they tire, and they can tire quite easily in a difficult situation.
We simply don't have the strength to be able to grunt it up with the guys, so we have to be mentally smarter and think about the techniques and how we're going to do things.
I try and do a bit more because I don't want to let the guys down.
Unfortunately for Claire Bailey, things weren't going to plan.
My only problem so far is I think I'm the only one that's been seasick. I think a couple of the guys have felt queasy, but I was pretty laid out for 48 hours, and that was a bit disappointing because I felt that I probably let them down.
I don't see a difference between us. When we're at sea, we're just sailors, but I think to have a crew where there's both women and guys on the same boat makes it really smoother, makes the guy speak better, calm them a little, I think.
There has to be a acceptance of both levels, and that we aren't going to be as strong as the guys, but technically and driving we are as strong.
We're strong enough to trim anything and to carry anything.
And if your day job is competing single-handed in an open 60 trimaran, then sailing a 120-foot catamaran with 12 others must seem like a walk in the park.
You know what? I would be a man, skipper man. I would never do only man crew. I think I like the mix of both. I mean, we're made to be together.
3 days after Doha rounded the Horn, Cheyenne was still foot to the floor, sailing in strong winds and able to halve the lead on their approach to the Cape.
We're certain that it was one of the fastest brownings of Cape Horn you can do because we were flying past there at 25 to 30 knots boat speed, screaming down the waves, so it was quite spectacular.
The two boats had seen significantly different conditions through the passage. For the first time in the race, the advantage was swinging to the American boat, and over the next few days, there could be a chance to claw back even further into Doha's lead.
Historically, Cape Horn's been an area where yacht races have been won and lost. Boats getting round and then being caught up from boats behind as they've fallen into wind shadows, and boats coming up behind and sailing quite a long way to the east and round to the east of the Falkland Islands, and then making good gains by being behind, seeing where there's been a problem and being able to sail around it. As they go further up the South American coast, Cheyenne have got an advantage from being behind. They've got better wind, better speed. It's a race on as to whether they'll catch them by Lobos Island. If they don't, then Doha gets an advantage, but if they do, it's a park and it's a restart for the whole race.
Cheyenne are reeling in Doha, but can they keep this momentum up? No question, Doha and Cheyenne will be pushing hard, but push too hard and they could spin off the track. And if so, Daedalus is waiting in the wings to pounce. The next week of the Oryx Quest will be a battle of nerve and guile. The race back to Qatar and $1 million is all on.